It's a weird week again in war. Truth is hard to see. Many stories are around. I was very much impressed that in Western media there was a new version of Saving Private Ryan.
We're looking for a Private James Ryan.
I don't know anything about Ryan. I don't care. Finding him so he can go home. If that earns me the right to get back to my wife, well then, that's my mission.
I mean, where's the sense of risking the lives of the 8 of us to save one guy?
First of all, what are you learning about this rather daring U.S. operation to rescue the service member?
Well, Wolf, it was daring and dangerous and highly intricate, involving dozens of warplanes, hundreds of U.S. military personnel and intelligence personnel.
James, what do you think? Is this a true story?
Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies with this story. Aircraft were sent to get him, and they were all blown up, and very strange aircraft that aren't used for rescue missions in an area really near this Isfahan, near this uranium facility. So there's a lot of speculation as to were they covering up one operation with another. So I just wanted to go through some of the funny timing here. We did hear like a week before that Trump was considering going and trying to do a raid on some Iranian facility to recover nuclear materials, which they've been obsessed with getting out of Iran. On April 3rd, Hegseth fires a lot of top generals who were critical of these operations, saying these will be highly unsuccessful and embarrassing.
This is a fishy story. And to see that generals are fired because they say what they think is also quite impressive. I mean, this happened in Germany too in a different context. You had General Zorn, who was the highest commander-in-chief of the German army at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and he said Ukraine doesn't have a chance of winning. And this is why he has been fired immediately. And the general who took care of the anti-COVID measures, in fact, got up 2 ranks into his position and is now commander-in-chief of all German armies. And I see this as very symptomatic, because it means that politics is not following military reasoning, but rather an agenda which might even be hidden to generals. But even generals might not know where this should lead to. This is what I think, because why would Pete Hegseth fire a general just because he contradicts? I mean, he might have a weak ego, but not that weak, because he's still the Secretary of State. What they are aiming at is a very strong hierarchy where, commands are just going through all levels of command, and at the end, they can make happen an agenda which seem obviously, or probably is too, against the interest of most people.
U.S. is claiming it's a success because they got this one pilot, but I mean, like 8 or 9, 10 aircraft were destroyed, and clearly some other kind of operation was going on. This was used to cover it up.
Maybe there's another explanation for all of this. Maybe the soldier was lost and found by a CIA operative. And then the generals and the PR team said, look, there is something we can do with this. Because the general situation for the military was dire, very difficult. And how would you communicate this to your own people? And secondly, they needed a cover for a huge operation which should be secret. So if you do a lot of things, if you a lot of aircraft carriers and helicopters and all of this, you need an explanation for this, especially if you lose the lives and if you lose equipment of soldiers. So maybe altogether there are 2 reasons for this story. One is to cover up something, and the other one is to have a positive story where everything is failing.
So this is a large number of downed aircraft, some failed mission of some sort, probably this uranium recovery thing, which was 40 kilometers from this abandoned agricultural airstrip that these things blew up on.
I don't believe that. I know that Western media are propagating this as a second narrative. Like the first narrative is Rescue Private Ryan. The second narrative is we want to have the uranium. I think military speaking, it doesn't make any sense. Enriched uranium is not a weapon. To make it a weapon is complicated and doesn't decide of the war. It wouldn't make sense to risk much equipment and many lives to just have this. I think there's something else hidden into it because I think the uranium story just, relates to this narrative that, Iran is a problem because they are building nuclear weapons.
Whatever it was, it screwed up, and they had to blow up all these planes, and it's a huge embarrassment.
You can point to the exact location, can't you?
Yeah, it's on this airstrip, 40 kilometers from some Iranian facility. The Iranians are claiming they kind of set up a trap for them, and they let the first plane land, and then as the second plane was landing, they attacked them all. They had to kind of scurry to get out of there. They somehow got out of there, and then the Americans decided to blow up the aircraft to not let the Iranians have it. But the helicopters used were specialized for special operations, not for rescue. A day after this failed attempt, all these planes blown up in Iran, Trump then concedes that Iran has full control of the Straits of Hormuz, and the U.S. is not going to be able to force it open. So the timing of that is interesting. Before that, he was demanding, Iran open the straits, we're going to force this open. The day after this event, he's sort of conceding that the straits, he can't open these straits, and Iran's going to have control of these straits, which they do.
Can you explain this? I mean, why would Trump be so idiotic?
He's looking like an idiot to the world stage, making demands that can't be met. I don't know, that saying he's going to force the Straits of Hormuz open. Let's play that clip of the former White House advisor.
I've worked in the White House during an energy crisis. There are no policy solutions to a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
You're saying there's not much a White House, a president can do to stop this bleeding.
You open up the toolkit, and the tools in there, the options range from marginal through symbolic to deeply unwise. Escorts are a sideshow. Strategic stock releases are a sideshow.
Gas tax holiday?
Gas tax holiday, sideshow. You got to restore the flow of the Strait of Hormuz.
Even if the White House, President Trump, declared an end of this war today, tomorrow, is there any guarantee that Iran would open up the strait and it's back to business as usual?
No guarantee. It's not like there's a big gate that swings open in front of the Hormuz and Iran locks the gate. So all Iran has to do is demonstrate every day, every other day, that it has the means and the ability to attack ships in the strait, and that will be enough.
So then he's issuing this 48-hour ultimatum that says he's going to bomb Iran into the Stone Age if they don't open the Straits of Hormuz, and threatening to blow up all the power stations and then Iran responds by saying, last night they said we're going to blow up all the power plants in the whole Gulf region and put the whole place into blackout. That would just be catastrophic. I don't know what kind of hell would unleash. But also, I mean, we should be aware that all Iran has to do to shut Israel down is to blow up its desalination plants. And the country will clear out in 48 hours. I think millions of people would have to leave within 48 hours. Even with all of our military force and hardware and toys and giving Israelis whatever they want, they are on thin ice and really have bitten off way more than they can handle. Taking on Iran, country with 10 times the population, 78 or 9 times the geographical territory, highly mountainous, easy to hide things in, and a people that are resilient, that Iranians are hard fighters. They're willing to die for the truth. And ancient Zoroastrian culture, they had this principle called ashar, the truth or the divine order for which one is ready to die for or die for their king for. And then in Islam in 680 AD, there was a martyr that chose to die instead of kneel to a tyrant. So there's this culture in Islam of the martyrdom. So they're very willing to die and take a heavy beating.
They do behave quite aggressively, though, regarding Lebanon.
Katz, the defense director, he's basically said they're trying to seize the southern 30 kilometers of Lebanon up until the Litani River. And they're using a Rafah Gaza approach, which was to blow up all the bridges to stop Hezbollah guys coming in there and basically destroy the infrastructure of that region to drive the population out of there. And they've issued expulsion orders for the entire southern swath of Lebanon.
Here you can see where the Israeli rockets hit Lebanon. It's quite impressive. Also, points in the north of the country have been hit too.
Today they unleashed like 100 different strike sites. About a week and a half ago, this General Zamir, who's on the equivalent of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of Israel, he issued this statement saying the Israeli military army is in collapse. They called up, I think, 3 weeks ago about 450,000 reserves to fight basically the Lebanese northern front. And he said that there's just a lot of desertions. The reservists don't show up. They're not hardened enough. You're looking at a country of 9 million prior to the 12-day war. That was about 7 million Jews and 2 million Arabs. During the 12-day war, Israel issued an edict saying that no Jews are allowed to leave the country because they were leaving when the rockets started falling, right? And so there was stories that I heard that estimated maybe 1 million left around the 12-day war period. So now you're talking not 7 million Jews, but 6 million. Now in this war, they haven't issued the same kind of order, but they've issued restrictions on the amount of flights that can go out. So I think it was like only one flight an hour and certain restrictions on the number of people who can leave per flight, like 80 to 100 per flight. They have put restrictions on locking their citizens into the country during a wartime, basically to prevent the country from clearing out, because then they can't prosecute a war. So let's be conservative. Let's say maybe 5 to 6 million Jews are left in Israel. If they issued a reservist summons for 450,000, and even with that, the general is saying, Zamir, they're having severe shortages and on the verge of collapse because they can't man things. Let's say this goes on for another year, 2 years. They are not going to be able to do all these things that they're taking on. They're taking on too much. Zamir asked Netanyahu to pass laws mandating that the Orthodox and the religious be conscripted. Long-term, Israel cannot sustain the amount of military operations it's trying to bite off.
And the situation around is also quite unclear to most people. If you just think of the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Salam, he is Harvard trained and is saying, look, this is not our war. It's like Iran and Israel fighting on our ground. And he instructed the military to not do anything, even though, rockets are falling all over the country, which is quite impressive. And the military, in fact, is acting against the Prime Minister, partly, and same with the media. So he instructed the media not to, promote the Hezbollah hierarchy. But you have in Lebanon right now 1.2 million people displaced by the attacks, and you have, tens of thousands of homes destroyed and thousands killed. It's a big war, and the whole country is affected. And you have this technocratic government where a lot of members, a lot of Secretary of States are in fact very Anglo-Saxon. The Minister for Economy is directly coming from BlackRock. You have this part of society which probably lost contact to the population. I think, from what I see in reports, that the Lebanese population is very anti-Israeli in the moment.
Well, they're all anti-Israeli there, but you should understand there's like the Christian communities and the Muslim communities, and in the Lebanese Civil War period that went on for 15 years in the 80s, some of the Christian evangelist types, they were even siding with Israel a bit, or thought we don't want to take on Israel at this time. They're too powerful, so we'll sort of be sympathetic with them. And more the southern Lebanese Muslim militias, like Hezbollah, the biggest one, was taking on the burden of having to directly attack Israel and defend the southern part of the country from Israel. So there's different. The Lebanese Christians tend to be more like, hey, let's not provoke the Israelis. They're so crazy. They're going to come in and make a mess like they're doing now. Whereas a lot of the Muslim ones are more like, let's fight these bastards and keep them out of our country. So there's a division. The president is really coming from those factions that are more like by default Israeli sympathetic in a sense, or non-provocative to them, but to the point now that it's like too much. Like, I mean, he's totally letting Israel run amok. He didn't even complain when they bomb things. I mean, it's like really kind of crazy. He's demanding Hezbollah disband when Hezbollah is really the only armed force keeping them from invading the south of the country. So not to defend either side, but
I think it shows how much the government isn't sovereign in that country anymore, and especially if the military is opposing the government.
Christian groups like my Christian Lebanese friends, they are tired of having Iran funnel money through there and funding Hezbollah, provoking attacks from Israel. So it is a sovereignty thing. You're right, but it is also just different opinions there. So a lot of my Lebanese Christian friends are like, you know, we're happy they're getting rid of these, moving to get rid of Hezbollah, even though they don't like Israel doing what they're doing.
There's not a strong unity. This is what you can observe, and it is clear that Israel is certainly using this to destabilize the country. So if it would, react with a strong pushback in unity, it would, of course, give a different picture than it gives now.
Yeah, they're just generally they don't like each other inside. So I mean, like they don't. The Christians look down on the Muslim ones, thinking they're primitive, and then the other ones think the Muslims think the Christians are more being traitors or they're infidels. So there's just there are genuine like disagreements between them, but you got to hand the Lebanese. They're not pushovers. They don't take any shit. They're like, it's way different than the other Arab countries. They'll fight for what they believe in, which is noble. So Lebanon is not a pushover country.
Yeah, but it seems like, Israel became bigger now, and that the project of Greater Israel is one step further.
Well, let's put this in context a little bit too, because in the 80s, Israel invaded southern Lebanon, and in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So, and both times they got their ass handed to them. They got really beat hard and had to withdraw, and it was a failure. So now they're doing it a third time. In the last couple of weeks, they've been getting pounded by Hezbollah. They've had, I don't know how many number of those Merkava tanks taken out, but over 40. I mean, they've had serious casualties and tanks getting nailed with drones. It looks like Iran's arming these Hezbollah commandos with fresh weapons and new missiles and things. So right now, Israel's not having a good time down there in southern Lebanon, and Zamir's warning is sort of is an indication of that. The Israelis are always lying about their casualties, like we are. America is in this Iran war. Then in recent news last night, I guess Trump was very embarrassed about this whole thing and this failed operation, these blowed up planes. He's got egg on his face. There's pressure from around the world on him to get these straits open. Asia's on its knees. And so he says, oh, look, we got this plan through. We got this peace agenda scheduled for Friday in Pakistan through Sharif, the president over there. They said, okay, we're willing. The Iranians are like, we're willing to sit down. The Americans have 15 points and the Iranians have 10 points that they want. But the Iranians agreed to sit down on Friday on the assumption that the 10 points are the basis of the starting of negotiations. And Iran said the ceasefire was for 2 weeks, and they said the ceasefire has to include Lebanon. Already last night, Israel said we're still going to continue to bomb the shit out of Lebanon. And today they've hit 100 sites. So that tells you how long this thing will last. So the main Iranian points, because you never hear them in the West, we're just giving you this side real quick. It says, no further aggression. We continue to control the Straits of Hormuz. Recognition of our right to enrich uranium. Lifting of all primary sanctions, lifting of all secondary sanctions, lifting of all UN security resolutions against Iran, lifting of the IAEA, that's the International UN Atomic Control Board, lift off their resolutions targeting Iran. The payment of damages, I think they won about $1 trillion now for all the damages that the U.S. and Israel have inflicted on them, and withdrawal of all U.S. combat forces from the region, which basically they've achieved. And then with this bombing of 28 bases, and the ending of war of all fronts, on all fronts in Lebanon, including Lebanon, which Israel's violated today.
Who issued this proposal exactly?
They say the Pakistanis acted as an intermediary, and it was sort of Trump's initiation. via Pakistan, and Iran agreed. It could be Trump is trying to save face and look like he's doing something to open the Straits. So Iran has agreed to open the Straits of Hormuz for 2 weeks while they negotiate this plan. But as you can tell from these points, such as enriching uranium, U.S. compensation of all the damages, I don't see U.S. sending $1 trillion to Iran. I don't see them agreeing to enriching uranium. Israel's definitely not going to stop aggressing against Lebanon. I don't see U.S. lifting the sanctions. Like, the U.S. is not going to agree to any of these things, so the war is going to continue.
So it's a bit like the Saving Private Ryan story. It's a way to just keep stories out there so that the illusion of good intentions is conveyed.
Yeah, Trump looks like a complete idiot. You had this whole open free trade area of the Hormuz, 20% of the world's energy and the fertilizers, third of the world's fertilizers going through there. Now he bombed Iran, and the thing is now de facto under control of Iran and being taxed by them. So he's totally screwed this thing up and granted Iran privileges that it didn't have before, and control over the world's trade.
Yes, but the narrative is that he pressures the rest of the world and the United States don't need this trade. But you made a good point that, in fact, new alliances are created between Iran and China, for instance.
Well, Iran and China have I know that they buy 80% of Iran's oil, that China is a huge energy consumer of Iran's oil, overland and by sea. They set up a rail system and I think a pipeline from Iran to China. So they've got a deep energy relationship, and also I know the Chinese have been lending all their satellite intelligence to Iran for their targeting. Russia, they say too as well, but the Russian leadership is more quietly sympathetic to Israel. They say they're more anti-Israel publicly.
You said Israel.
The leadership of Russia has a lot of Jewish elements in it, and I would say they're more sympathetic to the Israel project. Chinese are not. They're more squarely against it. And so the Russians are assisting the Iranians, but I would suspect the Chinese more enthusiastically due to a deeper energy relationship. Russia doesn't need energy. China needs energy. Iran supplies it to them.
This is very, very important point. And I would like to remind our audience that in 2018, Iran had a deal with Total in France for natural gas. And this deal was abolished the moment Donald Trump reinstalled the sanctions. And then Iran made a deal with China for the same natural gas. And the same is happening right now with oil, as you just explained. And, of course, that now boats can pass the Strait of Hormuz and paying in Chinese yuan is, of course, a shift in paradigm for the world trade, because the yuan becomes the currency of choice in that area. And this is, of course, the biggest offense you can give to the U.S.-dominated system.
Yeah, it further strengthens yuan in international trade when it really wasn't as big a thing before. But these things take time, to transition from dollar to yuan. All these actions of Trump just further undermine dollar dominance. When you see these charts of dollar dominance in world trade, they dwindle more and more every time one of these invasions occurs. Some people think that invasion of taking over Venezuela just before this was a way of shoring up our position before messing around with Iran.
There's another effect to this, which is that you have criticism to Israel morphing into anti-Jewish feelings around the globe. I see this a lot in social media. I see this in Substack articles. I see this in new YouTube stars like Professor Young, who is not a professor, but who is pushed by the YouTube algorithm seemingly. At least he's seen millions and millions of times, and he has been now guested Tucker Carlson to explain the new multipolar world order.
And Piers Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
And in the future, global economies have to commit to a bit of deindustrialization and even mercantilism in order to survive future shocks.
What he's doing is often very interesting, and 95 or even more I might agree to. However, he's always insisting on Israel being extremely important.
That is most likely to be dominant for the next 50 years is this country, Israel. Okay? It is the only wealthy, Western, high-tech society in which women choose to have more than 2 kids.
I think this is, how would I say, intentionally planted, because I see that algorithms are reinforcing his messages. Also, his CV seems a bit weird. He has been thrown out of China, then not, and then now he's working in Beijing.
He was accused of being a spy by China 10 plus years ago, and it's just like, he has really interesting analysis, and I like a lot of it. But then in the end, it's sort of like always promoting Jewish eschatology in this, well, we're going to see the war of Gog and Magog and the apocalyptic war, and Israel will reign supreme after it in this Pax Judaica world order. So it's like he's seemingly critical of Jewish Israeli eschatological things and really showing it bare. But then if you listen closely, he's saying it'll happen. And then the other strange thing I found about his narrative was that he promotes, like, he floats these really stupid things like, oh, it's the Jews, but also the Illuminati and the Jesuits and the Masons and the secret societies and the Israeli Sabbateans. So I've studied these conspiracy theories a lot, and I have to say that it's become very clear to me over the years that these tropes about the Masons and Illuminati and the Jesuits and they if anything, these were just front groups that power was exerted through, but not the seat of power. And for him to float that next to the Jewish groups who are running the world, but also along with the Masons, Vatican, Illuminati.
Now he's confusing. What he's doing is confusion, and he's at the end. So even though parts of it are really interesting, then there are the important parts are really confusing. And and it's very important, and it's very difficult, I think, to stay sober with this. Just stay sober. Just like if things are acting in the background and you don't see them, and there are perpetrators of crimes, these people are foremost people. People are accountable for what they're doing. If they do criminal actions, then they are criminals. So if you suspect them being criminal, they have to be in front of a court. And it doesn't matter what religion or ethnicity they have. And even if they were Jews, even if they were not Jews, even if they were Arabs or whatever, it doesn't matter, because what we see right now is that the crimes are committed against indiscriminately against everybody who is living somewhere where there's a conflict. You see the citizens of Israel suffering. You see people in Iran suffering, and the people who are pushing these wars, who are escalating the conflicts, they should be accountable for this, whoever they are. And I think we should come closer to this. And this guy, I am very suspicious of him. If you know their name, they're in the game. And he's a perfect example for this.
So thanks for watching, and consider donating.